Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is avoiding logistics FUD with my friend Steve Elwell. How's it going, Steve?
Hey, it's going great. How are things out by you?
Doing great. So please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
I'm Steve Elwell. I've been on the podcast, a bunch of times with you because we've been friends for a long time. I'm just outside of Detroit, Michigan. I'm the managing director and head of iDev Partners, and we provide management improvement, turnaround, and growth services to industrial logistics and technology businesses.
Awesome. As you mentioned, we are old friends. I think going back 6 years, you were my very first guest. And at that point, being on my podcast was not on anybody's radar. So no one was calling and asking, hey, can I please be on your podcast? It was more like, hey, will you do me a favor? And you did me that favor. And so I appreciate that. You've been on many times before, including we did a podcast called Avoiding Fear, Uncertainty, and Doubt in Sales. And that was a few years back. And I wanted to revisit it. And so we mentioned the word FUD, F-U-D. FUD stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And the other day we were having a conversation and we thought, we just were talking about fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I think we were talking about relation to what we see in Russia and Ukraine. And also you see it in the political world, but it's also something that is part of all our human relationships. And thought, let's revisit that topic. So I thank you so much for being on my podcast all these years, but also coming back on today.
I love this topic, as this is one of my all-time favorites. So thanks for giving me the chance to come back and talk about it some more with you.
Yep. And this will give us a chance to also revisit something you said on my podcast about poop in the punch bowl, and we'll get to that also.
Oh, I got a lot of feedback on that.
Yep. So a little more about your business. Who do you typically work with and what problems are you solving for them?
So typically what we work with logistics, manufacturing, and technology businesses. So there's a lot that fits in there. The problems they tend to face they're related to growth, efficiency, and in some cases, performance and turnaround if it gets bad enough. So they're really the same things. And what we do is we come in and this is going to be a topic of the conversation, is we will reestablish or increase the level of harmony, profitability, and performance in those businesses. And we can bring a small team in to help. We come at it a lot of different ways.
Yep. And we prepped for over an hour, mostly screwing around, pontificating. But when we talk about fear, uncertainty, and doubt, we see it every single day, and we don't necessarily quantify it, but we see it happening. So when you see all the stupid campaigns for all the political stuff, what they're always trying to do is get you to be afraid. Hey, if you vote for Steve Elwell, this is all going to go wrong. And they're trying to say this, Steve is somebody you can't trust. You should fear what might happen. You should be doubtful of the future if Steve's elected. And we see that all the time. Plus, right now this week, we're talking on August 16, 2024, we saw the Ukrainians just have an incursion into Russia. When you think about the Russian people, again, I feel bad for everybody involved in that, except for Putin. And you think what's happened to those people who live in that region, and again, it's been happening in Ukraine for years, where all of a sudden soldiers are in your neighborhood and you got to move. What does that do to the morale of the people in that situation?
It absolutely destroys it. It destroys it on an individual level, destroys it in their head. It destroys their belief in their leadership and their society to protect them and allow them to have the kind of life that they want. And then what it also does is it breaks down the bonds between people, and it breaks down the bonds and the trust between the people in those institutions that are there to do that work for them. So we've talked about this before a little bit, and now you just use the word harmony. Harmony, it creates disharmony. It creates disruption. And in disharmony and disruption slow down reaction, which is to some extent what they're looking for, the Ukrainians are looking for. And if you break down the bonds between the people and the institutions enough, you can cause that system, that society, to become unhealthy, slow down itself, or if you do it enough, it will collapse that system. And it exists everywhere in our businesses. It exists in our interpersonal relationships. It exists with our neighbors everywhere. And it's a question of how is it being managed, and to what end?
Yeah. And I've heard people talk about this, just fear. So I've been an employee, right? So I've worked for people, and you have a boss and you go, I really like this guy or I like this gal, and they take care of you and you take care of them. You'll run through walls for them. And one of the things, if you think about the people who you'll run through walls for, why? Because they've made you feel like, hey, this guy's got my back. This gal is going to take care of me. We're going in this together. They drove out the fear. I have no fear when I'm with them. I have no doubt. They're my people. I'm not worried when I'm with them. And then we've had bosses where you go, I never know where I stand with this guy. We've had customers where you say, I don't know where I stand with this guy.
And that's a neutral. It could be even worse. It could be even more neutral. This guy doesn't give a damn about me. He just cares about himself. Or even worse, this guy wants me to fail, which is an adversary. And they all speak to the levels of trust and the level of concern that you have and how much management and the things you're going to have to do, the energy you're going to have to bring to that relationship in order for you to survive in it or have it work out well for you.
Yeah. And I have a few friends in the logistics business right now, who are looking for jobs. And I feel awful. I've been there. It's a horrible feeling. You feel alone. You feel fearful because you got those bills bearing down on you, going through your savings, got the spouse on your back. You feel like maybe I'll never work again. Maybe I'm a fraud. Maybe all these doubts get into your mind, all this uncertainty. And so I always say, like, when I have a friend going through that, I always say, hey, let me help. What can I do? Can I make an introduction? And I try and scan. And the reason I do that is because I went through it back in the day, 2009, when all the bankruptcies hit automotive. I was unemployed and underemployed for 2 years. And it's a horrible feeling. And all you want somebody to do is, when you're an adult, so no one's going to necessarily do it, is say, hey, everything's going to be all right. When you're a kid, hey, mom and dad can tell you everything's going to be all right. As an adult, nobody does that for you.
A little harder. Not quite.
You can't sit on anyone's lap.
No, it's not. No, an ice cream cone is not going to help much.
So again, today's topic is avoiding logistics FUD with Steve Elwell. We're going to talk about all the places where we have FUD in our business. So Steve, I'll set the table here for a moment. So during COVID, we had boom times. It was great for the business. Now, we all had varying situations related to COVID, but there was money being made, and people were desperate for your logistics services. If you're a trucking company, you were making money. If you're a freight broker, you're making money. If you're a warehousing company, the money was plentiful. There was VC money coming in. You're getting monies from the government, and rates were low. It was, other than the sickness going around, it was boom time for us. Since COVID, now we're like 2 years out, I think, the money's not as plentiful. Rates are higher. There's a little less freight. It's not horrible, but the demand isn't quite what it once was. Rates are higher. There's no more VC money flooding the space. And all of a sudden, there is a little bit of fear. I think we had 10% of freight brokers go out of business over the last year. And by the way, we still have more freight brokers than we did probably pre-COVID. Some trucking companies have gone out of business, some warehousing companies. And all of a sudden, some reality check. We had some high-flying VC-backed companies come back to earth. Nobody likes any of this. And this is where fear, uncertainty, and doubt creep in. And I'll just give you one example. I talked to a trucking company the other day, big trucking company. And the owner said to me, I hate brokers because all the freight brokers, they come in and they take money, a lot of money, and they don't add any value. And I was like, they're there for a reason. But I know what he's feeling. He's feeling a little bit of the money crunch. And all of a sudden, he doesn't trust brokers. And there's always going to be that push and pull between those two groups. But it happens everywhere. And so first I want to talk about FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the sales process. And again, it's there and it's costing you sales. So please elaborate.
Okay. So FUD is many ways sabotage. Okay. It causes whatever you're doing to not work as well or not work at all. Okay. So if you have a sales process and you don't want to add FUD to it, you don't want to add, because you're self-sabotaging when you're doing that. And then when you have to understand what represents FUD to your counterparty. So what you want to do is you don't want to do things that cause fear, that cause inconsistency, that are unpredictable. You don't want to do things that are unreliable. You don't want to demonstrate that it's a zero-sum game where you take everything and they get nothing, where they perceive that you have no consideration for them and what they're trying to achieve. You do care about them, and that you're going to work towards something that works well for you so that you can continue to provide a high quality service, and works well for them so that they're paying a fair and reasonable and payable price for what they're getting. And over the long term, define long term however you like, that both parties in this relationship are going to be happy with the relationship's conduct and what comes from it. And so that would be the right way to do that. Those are the things you're trying to avoid, things that go against that.
So if I think about how as the sales guy, how do I put FUD into it? I don't respond to emails. I'm inconsistent. I say one thing and I don't necessarily do it. I give them a sense that I don't know, I can't predict this guy's behavior. He was one way when I talked to him one time, and then he went away and they came back, and I'm not so sure that I can really trust him. And what happens as the sales guy enters that FUD into the deal, the chances of that deal closing start to get a little more remote.
So if you remember, and this is going back a long way, so if you overpromise and underdeliver, if you make it too expensive, if you do other things, and you try to take advantage of situations that arise, these are all things that will generate FUD. These are all bad behaviors. Now, what is the impact in the sales? If we go back to 2007, there was a study by H.R. Challey out of Dayton that of 187,000 purchasing people about which things were the most impactful in making a sale. And the single greatest thing at 38% was the salesperson and his or her conduct. So a salesperson is introducing, who's behaving badly, is introducing FUD, definitely. But they're also introducing it into a place that's the single most important place in B2B sales. And so they're doing an enormous amount of damage by doing that. Or if they do it the right way, if they conduct themselves properly, they advantage themselves. That flips on its head that much more. So you can succeed. And so by behaving correctly, by being reliable, and the study talks about what many of those things are, and a lot of them are free. As an individual salesperson, you have the ability to either destroy a sale or to advantage one and cause it to happen.
Yeah. And Steve, before we hit record today, we were talking about this study that has been floating around. Google did it, and it was about their meetings. And they obviously have tons of employees and tons of meetings at Google. And they said that the chit chat before a call, where you're talking about, hey, did you see that game last night? Did you see the Olympics? Did that storm come your way? All those little seemingly unimportant conversations before the meeting gets started goes a long way to building relationships. And again, it's taking the FUD out, because you go, oh, that guy, I like him. We were just talking about the Olympics before we hit the record. Before the meeting really got started, we were talking about this thing, and I like him. We relate.
Well, you're getting a lot. So you're harmonizing the communication when you do that, by that person's tone of voice, or by the way if you're on a video call, if you're doing these other things, you get a chance to see where that person is and get a sense of what is the nature of this communication, not just the words, although that's part of it. What kind of mood this person, there's all these other cues. And what it does is it creates a known a known set of rules that and people are much less likely to make missteps and so on. And I think I mentioned the devices, the handshake between computer-based devices, where they exchange information in order to establish what the nature of that communication is going to be. This is the same thing, but with humans, and clearly it's a much more rich exchange, but that's its purpose. And yeah, human beings are not machines. And it's a mistake, and a lot of people do it. It's a mistake for people to think of us as machines because we're not.
So when we can accidentally do this, where we enter maybe through some inconsistent behavior, not following up, just sour notes, that we all of a sudden enter FUD, even if I didn't want to. Maybe I just did it accidentally because I said I was going to do something and I didn't. And by the way, a lot of people will forgive that. If you say, hey, I'm sorry, I've been out of the office a lot, whatever the excuse is, they'll buy it the first few times. But at some point they go, maybe they're too busy for me. I don't know. I'm not getting the right vibes. It's not happening here.
Intent. Yeah, you can introduce FUD inadvertently, and people can see it and understand it, and they'll forgive for it if there are other things around it that suggest, to your point, that this is a one-off and the intent behind it was right. If the intent is wrong, if you signal bad intent, if your organizations, and I think we talked about this a couple of years ago on this topic, if an organization has an individual and the individual has great intent, but the organization doesn't, that's a problem. That's a gigantic problem. And oftentimes that's what will happen because an organization will put a purchasing person out or a salesperson or a product manager, project manager out there, and then back them up as if they're a machine and they're going to optimize and pull every last penny out of that deal. And those people who are customer facing or outside facing are stuck twisting in the wind because they were undermined. They will have gone in with full intent, and we're going to have a relationship, and then of course they can't deliver.
Right now, I mentioned the distrust you sometimes have between brokers and carriers. A lot of carriers feel like, oh, that broker's making all the money and I'm not making any. So I'm squeezing my margin and those guys are fat and happy.
Sure. It's for sure. And it's always when it's boom times and there's money all over the place, everyone can have their lots of largesse and everything's great and wonderful. And then when it gets to be a little bit less, that guy who was his best friend is now a greedy SOB and who deserves to be. And again, this is envy, right? And of course, as the resource money or whatever becomes less and less as it approaches zero, you say, okay, look at a famine. Look what happens in famine. People will eat each other. It's horrible. How far will that go? It will go all the way under the wrong set of circumstances. And that can never be allowed.
So we definitely know FUD is a huge problem for sales. We just talked about that. It's also a big problem when you have again, it's the problem everywhere in human interaction, but when it comes to customers. So we have customers and FUD gets entered into this deal. And maybe I'll bring this up since I love your analogy. Talk about the poop in the punch bowl in relation to customers and their logistics providers.
So the thing is, how much poop in the punch bowl before you won't drink it? And the answer is, of course, any. There must be none in there. Zero is the tolerable amount.
And even the implication that there might be.
And there you go. There you go. Again, it doesn't actually have to be there, right? And it is a...
That's what FUD is. FUD is the poop in the punch bowl.
FUD. That's the beauty of FUD, right? It has that kind of name to it, right? It suggests there can be none. The implication that there's any at all is not good, is a problem. It's to some extent there. It could be there and never, because this is something that plays on the mind. And so it can't be there in any amount. And it must be eliminated, and it must be reduced, and all these things. And of course, at the beginning of this, we said it's everywhere. So wait a minute here. So if we're in a situation where none can be tolerated and it's everywhere, those two things don't live very well together. So the immediate question behind that is, okay, what do you do about FUD? Because it's there. In a sales environment, what do you do? We just talked about, hey, if somebody interjects something in there and yet they get the sense of that the person's the right, you can be forgiven. Why? How does that happen? That forgiveness is a very big thing. And you say, okay, what is it? The forgiveness is the relationship. You've built up a history. There is a consistency there. And this is an exception to that. Now, you can't do it forever, to your point. Then there's another side of it that talks about how do you actively get rid of FUD? How do you protect yourself? Yes, it's there, but how do I reduce its effects upon me and my customer and my organization and my sales process and so on? And really what that is, that's dealing with someone, a customer, someone else in the relationship who may not have good intent, who may be neutral, who may be, in fact, out to hurt me. And yet I still need to function. My organization needs to function in the face of that.
Yeah. And I've been part of business for many years and the logistics business for many years. And I've seen relationships go sour very quickly. And I've been part of that where you might be doing a real good job for a customer, a shipper. And then one day they say, hey, we're going to put this out. We're going to bid this business out. And you're like, oh, our business. And they're like, hey, you got a chance to win it. And you're like, oh, I thought I was winning it every day. I thought that I thought we had something. Maybe they got a new boss over there and that new boss decided we're going to put all this out for bid. And all of a sudden you go, God, I thought that was a sure thing. I thought we had those lanes. I thought I had that business. And now all of a sudden I'm not so sure anymore. Now, if you're a carrier, you start looking and going, who else needs help in this lane? I have to start protecting myself. And so you can have a relationship go bad almost overnight by a new boss gets there and says, hey, let's bid it all out. And that's not the only thing. It also could be, hey, we got new rules that you can't comply with. It could be, hey, they just got a new guy in there who, I don't know, the old guy had my back. I don't know this guy. And he doesn't seem open to a relationship. He doesn't talk to us. We're trying to, by the way, I always say the same. Any customer I've ever had, regardless of whether it worked in engineering or in production or in logistics, even in this business, who doesn't talk to you, who can't answer the phone, who doesn't want a relationship, you at some point go, at some point, I'm going to leave that relationship or they're going to leave. And they'll just say, yeah, you weren't getting it done. You're like, yep, I know, because we never talked. It just, the people who hold you at arm's length, at some point, the relationship is over. There's too much FUD got developed in the middle.
Well, there's differences in expectations, right? We talked about this. If you are feeling bad about a relationship, there's by definition the expectations of both sides are mismatched in some way, and that can come in the form of a change. You say, okay, these guys are going to put some new rules on me, and it's going to cost, and I didn't expect them to do that, or I thought the relationship was this, and that was the case of we put the person out front, and the organization behind them is not, pushing them into different things. So in those, are you in a position to change that, to change the relationship itself? Maybe not. It depends, right? Can it be forgiven? I mean, it all depends on the circumstances, which the relationship might not be salvageable. The question becomes the level of injury that you receive as a result of this situation. And so usually the feeling is, hey, look, I thought we were going to get this deal. We didn't get this deal, or we have to do something new. You have to put more, they're saying, put more energy into this, work harder, put more money, resource this thing more. And then in the mind of the person, they say, look, I don't think I'm getting it back. That wasn't the basis of our deal, whatever. And then you're forced with, and so let's say none of that works, and you're now forced with a choice, saying, look, I'm going to end the relationship. That relationship is 50% of my business. That's a problem. That's a giant problem. Oh, and I don't have anything immediately there to replace it. That's another problem. So how do you advance? So how do you position yourself to not have that, to not be damaged horribly as a result of this? And the answer is, oh, I have to have more business that I can use to replace this. And I have to get it fast enough. So I have to have some speed. I have to have some capacity. I have to have the ability to move from where I am to this new situation so that when this relationship ends, I'm not injured. And if I can move fast enough and develop and bring in new business and do these things and set it up at low enough cost, maybe I can have somebody waiting in the wings for when this guy leaves. Maybe I don't care. Maybe I can get it so fast that when this guy is gone, that the business just immediately flows, in which case any customer leaving, if you can do it fast enough and in great enough scale, doesn't matter whether they leave, you're always safe. Now that's expensive, but and maybe not realistic in every situation, but it speaks to the idea of speed. It speaks to the idea of not being over reliant. So if you're super fast, you can have one customer and that would be great. You might not be super fast. You may not be possible to have one customer represent more than 5% of your business, in which case you have to have 20. But it depends how fast you are and how good you are. But your speed, your fluidity of motion, of action in this thing, your ability to be successful, your understanding of the situation as it exists, and allow you to be safe no matter what the other side is doing, if you set it up correctly. So FUD can be brought into your life, can be brought into your relationship, but because you understand it, because you understand what the response is, you're still safe.
Yep. Yeah. And I think one of the things in the logistics and transportation business is we do see a certain amount of customers who are transactional spot business where it isn't necessarily a deep relationship, and you can't expect them to go too far above and beyond unless they're hoping to build something beyond that. But I always think that I prefer the strategic relationship, a contracted or dedicated relationship where they are going to go above and beyond because I've given them a certain amount of business. And I used to say to people who wanted me to be transactional when I was selling logistics services, I was like, no, I'm not interested in that. And I always say the term, we're not dating, we're not engaged, we're getting married. And that means you vet who you're in those relationships with. But that also means on a crazy day, on the end of the quarter, on a Friday, on the 31st of the month, you can call me and we'll stay late to make sure your shipments get out. And you can earn that trust by making some commitments and building that relationship. And I always believe that is the better way to do business. It is with leadership. And I think sometimes we bring FUD on ourselves, and I'll speak from the shipper perspective, where you keep pushing the price down on everybody, and then all of a sudden they're cutting corners now. And we have freight fraud going on right now. You never have freight fraud with someone you've been working with for 5 years. It's freight fraud with somebody who's brand new.
Yeah, exactly. They all look the same. Everybody looks the same to me. Come on, because I don't know them. Look, there's the end. Look, what you're talking about is the deeper relationship. What does that mean? That means that there's a financial environment, there's a relationship environment, there's a communication environment that affords the ability to deliver excellence. However you want to go the extra mile. It's reliable. It's quality service. Your stuff doesn't arrive broken. You know what's going on. You don't have to lie awake at night worrying about this because you've over-optimized it. Oh, it's just the money that matters, and then everything else goes to pot. It's like, that's not the way that what you're talking about is, as an individual, as a business, trying to deliver a service, that you're delivering a service that's worthy of your time to be in that business. It is excellent in its own way, and it promotes the value of the people who are putting their lives and energy into it. It's validating to that. And there are environments that are so small and so devoid of water and life that can't be delivered. And there are people out there, there are many people and organizations out there who see it as a single variable thing. It's just the money. And the damage that's done to industries and enterprises by that kind of thinking is tremendous. It's short term. And it introduces FUD. It chops up these organizations into small groups that fight with each other. It is a highly impoverished approach.
Right. Well, Steve, we've talked about this before, and you know it as well as I do. There's a certain amount of shippers who'll just say, oh, you want to work with us, Steve? I'll send you an Excel spreadsheet of next week's shipments, and you put a price on each one, and you're like, hey, look, I was hoping to come in and understand your organization. I want to understand where you ship. And they're like, no, I gave you next week's load. All I'm going to tell you is you can put a price in there and send it back to you. And then what that ends up that costs them in the long run. That's a bad way to do business because, hey, everybody's transactional. You don't owe them anything. And if something goes wrong, you're like, oh, say something went wrong. So what? I'm not working with them ever again anyway.
Yeah, look, I do. Like some people can buy what they want to buy. You can buy bargain basement if you choose to, and that's fine. But buyer beware. That comes with some things that you might not like. And if you're clear about what it is on the front end and are willing to accept that, fair enough. But if you're not and you're expecting more, that's maybe not okay.
Right. So let's switch gears for just a second. So we talked about FUD, that's fear, uncertainty, and doubt, in the sales process and in the customer relationship. And also, I guess that's also the operational piece. How do we go about eliminating FUD? What is the opposite of FUD and how do I get it?
Okay. So if we talk about we'll aggregate it into harmony, which is opposite, and then disruption. So FUD are elements of disruption, causes disruption. The parts don't work well together anymore, either because there's something wrong with the part or there's something wrong with the connection between those parts. And it adds friction. It adds, like I said, disharmony, right? They're not working well together. And if they don't work well enough together, it can fall apart. And it can fall apart in a general sense across all of it or just a few of it and cause the system to fail. Okay. And it's a hobbling and resulting in a failure of the system. This is what FUD generates. Harmony, the lack of FUD and other things, has to do with things are working well together. The communication is good. There is trust. There is a common understanding. There is a history that can be believed in. There are, and so what are all these things in a business, in a logistics, in a sales, in an organizational sense? I think we talked earlier about a gentleman who put team together, and he says, look, we're going to bring everybody in from all over the country, and we're going to incur this giant travel expenses for the sole purpose of making sure that the members of this team spend time together, face to face. And they're going to work together, and they're going to get to know each other, even though they live in different parts of the country. Why? The reason is because so that sheer contact with one another is something that builds the team. It builds understanding between the team members. There's so many unspoken things that develop as a result of that when they're apart, they can trust each other to act in a certain way because they've seen them do it before. They have a feel and a gut level understanding of who that person is and how they're going to react. Big deal. Huge deal at the team level. Very difficult to come by.
Yep. Steve, I saw this many years ago. Remember, he must be pretty old by now. Tom Peters, he was one of the first management consultants who used to write books. He wrote a number of books. And each book was basically criticizing his last book, said, here's where I went wrong. And he is a fantastic guy. I know he's still out there. But Tom Peters wrote that the very best business meeting was a barbecue. And a lot of people would say, well, that's not a business meeting. But it was just the whole idea that we're going to come together. We're going to eat some food outside. We're going to have some beer. We're going to have this meeting of the minds, this shared experience that is going to hopefully bond us together beyond the dollars and cents. And that kind of relationship is going to bleed into the day-to-day. Because I know you. And because you trust me, we talked about baseball at the barbecue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see what he's saying. And so somewhere along the line, the idea that professional meant impersonal, which is a very Taylor approach. That I remember I say that, I think about 1 million square feet of cubes and nameless, faceless people in black suits and white shirts and ties and stuff. And everybody's a number at best. That's not professional. It's not professional in the slightest. What it is isolation. That is
treating us like machines.
Like machines. You don't matter as an individual. And that means when you have that, it doesn't just sit within your organization at the individual level. It also bleeds into your customers and suppliers and all of those people. And that's not the way that is a very fragile thing because it can't adapt. Because what is the cohesion between the individuals? It's nothing. The guy gets laid off. Oh, his cube is empty. He didn't even remember the guy's name anyway. Sat next to him for 20 years. That is, look, that idea is at the center of so many things about isolation in our situation as a society in the U.S. right now. That it gets talked about quite a lot, but it is a source of bad business. Knowing each other, trusting each other, being open with each other, and doing that on a justified basis, and being safe doing that. Not just thinking you are, but actually being that you're not going to be betrayed, and that when you guys go to war together, figuratively, that this is a great thing. And if you're lucky, once or twice in your career, you can find yourself a part of a team that's like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have been part of those teams. First off, I worked for bosses who've engendered that, and they could call me 20 years later right now and say, "Hey, Joe, I need you to get in your car and come here and help me on whatever," and I would do it. And there's other people who you go, "Oh, this guy he doesn't like me. I don't think he likes me. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I never know where I stand with him or her." And that person, you can't wait to get away from him. And same thing with customers. We've all had customers who go, "Yeah, we are on the same page. We're taking care of them. They're taking care of us." And there is no FUD getting in between us. And that's what we all want. Those are the special relationships you're looking for in this business world.
So I've done a fair amount of work in the defense space, and you listen to people coming back from Afghanistan, from Iraq, and you listen to videos and public statements from people out of the special forces community talk about what it's like when they come back. And there's a sense of loneliness about it. And the idea, and the loneliness is about, I was part of a group of people, particularly when they're operating in small teams. The special forces community is a great example. Oh, I could trust this guy. We're in this environment. It's us. This is my brother. And the funny is, it doesn't matter what they look like. It could be some Afghani translator somewhere. They could be from completely different socioeconomic, ethnic, the whole bit. But these people are their brothers. And they'll do anything for these people. And the sadness that they come back to, and they talk about it, the loneliness is that those relationships are not easily replicated when they come back. And that's a shame. And those relationships, not to that level of intensity, but those kinds of things where you're part of a group that's doing that kind of work and you trust each other in that way, that is the anti-FUD. Because there is no FUD that's going to get in between those people. There is nothing you can do to them that will make them believe that person turned on them. There will never be fear, uncertainty, or doubt. It's fidelity. It's a wonderful thing, and it's beautiful. And it can be brought to these organizations.
Yep. It's a leadership thing. And I think I think we can all be that individual leader. We can try and do the best in those relationships. Obviously, you can't do it with people who don't want to be, who don't want anything to do with it.
But it doesn't have to be, it can be great, but it doesn't have to be great for everybody. It can't, by definition, it can't be. But it is one of those things where you can create incentives within your organization that bring this up, or you can create disincentives to it. If you make it about the last penny on the table in a negotiation, and you say, this is the only thing that matters when we're buying this service, well, we're going to gut these trucks. The only thing send out the spreadsheet, right? If that's all that matters, and we're going to bonus you on that, we've created a tremendous disincentive to put FUD in a relationship with a supplier.
Right. Yeah. We've all been on probably both sides of these transactions. And again, the people who you work with, those great teams that don't have the FUD that we're talking about. And we all want that. And I think it really just have to be a little more conscious of the little things that cause the FUD. And sometimes it's not considering the other person's position. And sometimes your boss tells you, go save us that money. You go start to save that money. And then you realize, oh my God, in saving this money, I probably cost myself money in the long run because of some of the things we've done.
Oh, absolutely. And it is, look, if you're in a position of responsibility, if you're an individual, your first job is to make sure you're leading yourself correctly. Okay. And accepting responsibility and living up to expectations, yours and others, and the members and other people who are relying on you. If you're in a position of leadership, then it's your responsibility to create an environment where these other things can develop. And that means if you're a president of a company or a vice president or whatever, and if to the extent that you have an environment that is not friendly to this in some way, then that's a limitation. Now, you've said it many times, a team can never outperform its coach. And that's correct. And the coach's job is to create that environment where this can happen and then help to populate that environment with people who are responsive to it and who can grow within it and perform and become, as an individual and as a group, that thing that delivers that excellence. And that it's resilient, because there are going to be things out there that are trying to kill it. Competitors, all the environment, you're depending on the industry, right? That customer with the spreadsheet, all of those things work against it. And your job is to create it and then to protect it and to enable it to protect itself. And that's about getting rid of and creating a capacity to fend off FUD.
I love it. I love it. So I'm going to wrap this bad boy up. I'm going to summarize, and I want to get your final thoughts on the topic. So I'm talking to my friend Steve Elwell. We're talking about how to avoid FUD. That's fear, uncertainty, and doubt in our business life. I guess it applies everywhere, but we're talking about in logistics specifically. So again, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, it is at a macro level. We see it used as military tactics. We see it used in propaganda. We see it in politics. As soon as you become aware of FUD, you notice it everywhere. You're like, oh, people are trying to bring FUD into to hurt their competition. But for most of us in the logistics world, in the transportation world, supply chain world, what we're trying to do is just prevent FUD from getting in our organizations and in our relationships. So when it comes to sales, you got to keep that FUD out, because as you bring fear, uncertainty, and doubt into that sales relationship, you hurt your sales. You probably eliminate your sales at a certain point. And it applies also to customer relationships. If you have a relationship that has lots of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, you're going to lose that customer, plain and simple. It also applies in operations. Sometimes when we're trying to cut costs, we end up costing ourselves more because we brought in a whole bunch of fear, uncertainty, doubt. Other person checked out of the relationship because they aren't making enough money, or maybe they don't feel appreciated. The opposite of all this, though, is building relationships, building trust, developing leadership within those organizations and within those relationships. Enough of my blather. Final thoughts on the topic, Steve Elwell.
Geez, that's a huge. All right. Seek harmony. Avoid disruption. Be the person your mother taught you to be.
Exactly.
Be what to be right. Live to that. And think of other people. Create environments where other people can thrive. Be that light. And you will be rewarded handsomely. Much more money and much, much more.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Steve. One more time, who's the sweet spot for iDev partners?
Logistics, manufacturing, technology, who are experiencing troubles with, honestly, the details of what we just talked about. This stuff presents as sales problems, cash problems, operational problems. It presents as can't tell what's going on in my organization. The communication isn't right. And it'll show up as, hey, I'm not making enough money and I'm not happy at all with what's going on here. So seems general, but it's really all one thing.
Yep. I love it. I love it. What I'll do is I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile. I'll also put a link to all the other episodes we've done together. So if someone wants to listen to the previous episodes with Steve, you can, and I highly recommend you do. And I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile, a link to your website, and any other links you and your marketing team give me. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Hey, thanks, Joe. It's been a hoot as always.
All right. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.